The scent of rain on hot asphalt was the first thing Ilara noticed when she stepped out of the cab. It was a clean, electric smell, a promise in the humid city air. The second thing she noticed was the woman standing under the awning of the gallery, a silhouette of sharp angles and coiled energy against the glowing glass. Her name was Zora. Ilara knew this because Zora's name was on the invitation, scrawled in silver foil beneath the title of the exhibit, Chthonic, Art from the Depths. Zora was the artist. Ilara, a curator from a smaller, more traditional city, had been sent to scout. She'd expected someone older, softer. Zora was neither. She was all stark contrast, hair the color of a raven's wing shaved close on one side, falling in a silken wave over the other, framing a face of severe, almost cruel beauty. Her eyes, from across the street, looked black. She wore a simple black leather harness over a blood-red silk shirt, and her hands, stained with what might have been ink or clay, were shoved into the pockets of her tailored trousers. Ilara's heart did a thing it hadn't done in years. It didn't flutter, it stuttered, like a faulty engine catching on a new, more potent fuel. She smoothed her cream-colored linen dress, a uniform that suddenly felt absurdly out of place, and crossed the street. The gallery was a cacophony of whispered conversations and clinking glasses, but it all faded when Zora's eyes landed on her. They weren't black, Ilara saw as she drew closer. They were the deepest, richest brown, the color of fertile earth, and they held an unnerving, direct intelligence. Ilara Vance, Ilara said, extending a hand. I'm with the... I know who you are, Zora interrupted, her voice a low, smoky contralto that vibrated in the space between Ilara's ribs. She didn't take the offered hand. Instead, her gaze traveled over Ilara's face, lingering on her mouth, then down to the vulnerable line of her throat. It felt less like a look and more like a physical touch, a deliberate, slow caress. You're here to see if my work is palatable for your provincial little museum. Ilara's breath hitched, half in offense, half in a shocking, visceral thrill. I'm here to see if it's good. A slow, dangerous smile touched Zora's lips. Then let me show you. The art was brutal and beautiful. Sculptures of twisted, polished driftwood that looked like bone. Canvases layered with thick, angry oils in shades of rust, obsidian, and deep marine blue, scored with lines that looked like ancient, forgotten maps or scars. It was art that spoke of things buried, of pressure and heat, of secrets forced to the surface. It was the most honest, raw thing Ilara had ever seen. Zora didn't explain her work. She simply stood beside each piece, a silent, intense guardian, her presence amplifying the art's powerful resonance. Ilara felt herself being pulled into Zora's orbit, into the dark, magnetic world she had created. This one, Zora said finally, stopping before a smaller piece hidden in an alcove. It wasn't like the others. It was a diorama under glass, a miniature world of moss and smooth, grey stones, with two figures carved from the same piece of dark walnut. They were women, their bodies curved and intertwined so perfectly it was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. It was an act of tenderness, of protection. It was love, rendered in wood. It's called The Keepers, Zora murmured, her voice softer now, meant only for Ilara. It's breathtaking, Ilara whispered, and when she turned her head, she found Zora was closer than she'd thought. Close enough to smell the scent of her, turpentine, cedar, and the faint, clean sweat of a long day. The critics, Zora said, her dark eyes fixed on Ilara's, they want the rage. They understand the rage. They don't know what to do with this. She gestured vaguely at the diorama. They think it's a weakness. It's not, Ilara said, her voice firm, surprising herself. It's the source. It's the reason everything else exists. The thing worth clawing your way out of the dark for. Zora went perfectly still. For a long moment, she just searched Ilara's face, as if reading a text she'd been trying to translate her whole life. The noise of the gallery receded, becoming a distant hum. The air between them grew thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Without a word, Zora turned and walked away. Ilara, her pulse a wild drum in her ears, could do nothing but follow. They weaved through the crowd, Zora ignoring calls of congratulations, her focus absolute. She led Ilara through a door marked private, down a narrow, concrete staircase, and into the belly of the building. It was her studio. Chaos and order in equal measure. Canvases leaned against raw brick walls. Tools lay scattered on workbenches. The air was thick with the smells of oil paint, clay, and coffee. In the center of the room was a worn velvet couch, splattered with a lifetime of color. Zora closed the heavy door, and the world went quiet. "Why did you bring me down here?" Ilara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because up there is for them," Zora said, stepping into Ilara's space. Her heat was a tangible force. "This is for me. And I think this is for you, too." She reached out, not for Ilara's hand, but to trace the line of her jaw with the very tips of her fingers. The touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to Ilara's core. Her skin sang with it. "I saw the way you looked at my work," Zora continued, her thumb brushing Ilara's lower lip. "You didn't just see it. You felt it. You recognized it." "I did," Ilara breathed, leaning into the touch, her body acting on a primal instinct her mind couldn't hope to control. "I've been carving and scraping and bleeding onto canvases for years trying to find that feeling," Zora whispered, her face inches away now. Her breath was warm against Ilara's mouth. "And you just walk in, wearing linen and smelling of summer, and you have it in your eyes." The kiss wasn't gentle. It was a collision. It was the culmination of every charged glance, every unspoken word, every thrum of energy that had passed between them since they'd met. Zora's mouth was hot and demanding, tasting of red wine and a deeper, darker hunger. Ilara met her with a desperation she didn't know she possessed, her hands coming up to tangle in the silken fall of Zora's hair, pulling her closer. It was a kiss that felt like drowning and coming up for air all at once. Zora's hands were everywhere, mapping the geography of Ilara's back through the thin linen, pulling her flush against her own body. The hard leather of the harness pressed against Ilara's chest, a thrilling contrast to the softness of Zora's mouth and the silk of her shirt. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air, Zora didn't go far. She rested her forehead against Ilara's, her eyes closed, her breathing ragged. "Tell me to stop," she murmured, her voice rough with want. "No," Ilara said, the word a vow. She captured Zora's mouth again, this kiss slower, deeper, more exploratory. She learned the shape of Zora's lips, the subtle shift of her jaw, the soft sound she made in the back of her throat when Ilara's tongue met hers. They stumbled toward the couch, a tangle of limbs and frantic hands. Zora laid Ilara back against the multicolored velvet, coming down over her, a dark angel blotting out the world. She kissed her way down Ilara's neck, her teeth grazing the frantic pulse at its base, and Ilara arched against her, a soft cry escaping her lips. "You're so bright," Zora whispered against her skin, her hands working the buttons of Ilara's dress. "So clean. I want to mark you. I want to get my hands all over you." "Yes," Ilara gasped, the permission tearing from her. She wanted to be marked. She wanted to be claimed by this woman, by her art, by her darkness. Time lost all meaning. In the cocoon of the studio, with the distant sounds of the party above them a forgotten dream, they discovered each other. Zora's touch was both possessive and reverent, as if Ilara herself were a precious, fragile artwork. Her kisses traced paths of fire across Ilara's skin, each one a silent, desperate communication. Later, much later, they lay tangled together on the narrow couch, the velvet soft and worn beneath them. Ilara's head was on Zora's chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of her heart. Zora's fingers, those gifted, stained artist's fingers, traced idle, soothing patterns on Ilara's bare shoulder. Ilara looked up at the woman who, in a matter of hours, had dismantled her entire world and begun rebuilding it into something terrifyingly new and beautiful. Zora's eyes were closed, her severe features softened in the dim light. "The diorama," Ilara said softly. "The two figures. Who are they?" Zora's eyes opened. She looked down at Ilara, her gaze so open and unguarded it made Ilara's heart ache. "I didn't know," she admitted, her voice raw with a new kind of honesty. "I carved them years ago. I just knew they belonged together. That they were two halves of the same story." She brushed a strand of hair from Ilara's forehead. "Now I know. They were a premonition." She leaned down and kissed Ilara again. This kiss was different from all the others. It wasn't